The Waterford crystal wine glass slips from my fingers and shatters against the marble floor of the Zhao family dining room, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent space where 50 of the most influential people in the city had gathered to celebrate what I thought was my engagement dinner. But I realize now as I watch my fiancé, Marcus Zhao, leap from his chair beside me to rush toward the trembling figure of Lily Wong standing in the doorway with tears streaming down her porcelain face and her hands protectively cradling what I can now see is a barely visible bump beneath her designer dress, that this was never meant to be my celebration at all. Marcus, Lily whispers, her voice breaking in that delicate way that has always made men want to protect her. The same voice that used to call my fiancé late at night during our 3-year relationship with various emergencies and crises that somehow always required his immediate attention, leaving me alone in restaurants and movie theaters and family gatherings, while he rushed to her side like a loyal dog responding to his master's call. I couldn't wait any longer to tell you the baby is yours and I'm scared and I don't know what to do. The words hit the room like a bomb, and I feel every pair of eyes turn toward me, watching for my reaction, waiting to see how the naive Elena Chen will handle this public humiliation, this ultimate betrayal in front of everyone who matters in our social circle. But I'm frozen in my chair, unable to move or speak or breathe, as I watch the man I've loved for 3 years, the man I gave everything to, including my family's financial support and my own inheritance, and my complete trust and devotion, immediately abandon me without a second glance to wrap his arms around the woman who has just announced she's carrying his child. It's going to be okay, Marcus murmurs into Lily's hair, his voice gentle and loving, in a way I realize now he has never spoken to me, not even in our most intimate moments. And I watch as his mother, Lady Zhao, rises from her seat at the head of the table with a satisfied smile that she doesn't even bother to hide, her cold eyes meeting mine across the elaborate centerpiece of white roses and gold candelabras that I had personally selected for what I thought was going to be the happiest night of my life. Well, Lady Zhao announces to the room, her voice carrying the authority of someone who has just orchestrated the perfect coup. I suppose this changes everything, doesn't it, Elena dear? Her use of the word dear drips with false sweetness and barely concealed triumph. And I realize that this moment, this devastating revelation has been planned all along, that every kind gesture and warm smile she's given me over the past 3 years has been nothing more than an elaborate performance while she waited for the right moment to dispose of me like a used tissue. The engagement ring on my finger suddenly feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. This 3-carat diamond that Marcus presented to me 6 months ago in front of his entire family with speeches about love and forever and building a life together. But I can see now that it was all a lie, all part of some grand scheme that I was too stupid and trusting to recognize, even when the signs were right in front of my face. Marcus has always loved Lily, Lady Zhao continues, addressing the room as if I'm not even here, as if I haven't just been completely destroyed in front of everyone I know. We were simply waiting for her to finish her studies abroad and for the right moment to make their relationship official. But sometimes life has its own timeline, doesn't it? She gestures toward Lily's stomach with obvious delight, and I watch as several of the guests nod knowingly, as if they were all in on this secret except for me, the pathetic fool who actually believed that Marcus Zhao could love someone like me. I try to stand up, my legs shaking beneath the designer gown that I spent weeks selecting for tonight. This beautiful ivory silk dress that I thought would make me look like the perfect fiancée, the perfect future wife and mother and partner for the heir to the Zhao family empire. But my knees buckle and I have to grip the edge of the table to keep from collapsing completely as the full reality of my situation crashes over me like a tidal wave. This is not a surprise pregnancy. This is not some unfortunate accident that has complicated an otherwise solid relationship. This is the culmination of a carefully orchestrated plan to use me and my family's resources to save the Zhao Corporation from bankruptcy, while keeping Marcus's true love safely tucked away until the moment was right to reveal her. And I have been nothing more than a convenient placeholder, a financial lifeline disguised as a romantic relationship. A useful fool who handed over everything she had without asking for anything in return except the promise of love that was never real. I think it would be best if Elena left now, Lady Zhao says, and I watch as she gestures to the servants positioned around the room, their faces carefully blank as they wait for their instructions. And I realized that even they knew this was coming, that everyone in this house except me understood that tonight was about my humiliation and removal, not my celebration and acceptance into the family. Marcus, I whisper, my voice barely audible above the murmur of conversations that have started around the table as the guests begin to process this dramatic turn of events. But he doesn't even look at me, his entire attention focused on comforting Lily as she sobs into his shoulder. And I understand with crystal clarity that I have never been anything more than a convenient distraction, a placeholder to keep his mother happy while his heart belonged to someone else entirely. The servants approach me with the kind of polite but firm determination that makes it clear I have no choice but to leave. And I realize that if I don't walk out of this room under my own power, they will escort me out like a trespasser, like someone who was never supposed to be here in the first place. And the humiliation of that prospect is somehow worse than everything else that has already happened tonight. I remove the engagement ring with trembling fingers, the diamond catching the light from the chandelier above as I place it carefully on the white tablecloth in front of my untouched dinner plate. And I hear several people gasp at the finality of that gesture, the symbolic severing of a relationship that I now realize was always doomed to end this way. Goodbye, Marcus, I say, my voice stronger now, as I find some reserve of dignity I didn't know I still possessed. And I turn toward the door without looking back, without giving him or his mother or his precious Lily the satisfaction of seeing me break down completely in front of their audience of family and friends and business associates who will undoubtedly spend the rest of the evening discussing this scandal over their wine and dessert. As I walk through the marble hallway toward the front door of the Zhao mansion, past the portraits of Marcus's ancestors who built this empire through ruthless business dealings and strategic marriages, I can hear the conversation resuming behind me. The sound of Lady Zhao's voice explaining to the guests that this is actually wonderful news, that Marcus and Lily have been in love since childhood, and that I was simply a temporary arrangement that served its purpose but was never meant to be permanent. The cool night air hits my face as I step outside into the perfectly manicured gardens where Marcus and I used to walk hand in hand while he told me about our future together, our children, and our shared dreams, and the life we would build as partners in both love and business. But I know now that he was probably thinking about Lily during every one of those conversations, comparing my inadequacies to her perfections, and counting the days until he could finally be free of his obligation to me. I realize with a devastating clarity that cuts through me like a knife that this betrayal goes far deeper than just tonight's revelation, that everything I thought I knew about my relationship with Marcus has been built on lies and manipulation and the cold calculation of two families who needed my money more than they needed my happiness, and that I have been living in a fantasy world where love and loyalty actually meant something to the people I trusted most. The next few months pass in a blur of devastating revelations and crushing defeats that strip away everything I thought I knew about my life and my worth and my place in the world, as the Zhao family systematically destroys everything my family has built over 4 generations while I watch helplessly from the sidelines, unable to stop the avalanche of consequences that my naive trust has unleashed upon the people I love most. My father, Chen Wei-ming, suffers his first heart attack 3 days after the engagement dinner when he learns that the Zhao family is withdrawing their support from several major business deals that were contingent on our family's alliance. And I watch him age 10 years overnight as he realizes that his daughter's broken engagement will cost him everything he has worked his entire life to build. The Chen Industries stock price plummets as investors lose confidence in our ability to maintain the international partnerships that were secured through our connection to the Zhao Corporation. And I discover that Marcus's promises to support our business ventures were contingent on our marriage, that every contract and agreement was structured to ensure that my family would be completely dependent on his goodwill, giving him the power to destroy us the moment I was no longer useful. I liquidate my personal inheritance, every penny that my grandmother left me in trust, to try to keep our family company afloat, but it's like trying to stop a hemorrhage with a bandage, and I watch our employees get laid off one by one, as we're forced to close subsidiaries and sell assets just to pay our creditors. While Marcus and Lily's wedding announcements appear in every society magazine with photos of them looking blissfully happy and completely indifferent to the destruction they've caused. My mother falls into a severe depression that keeps her bedridden for weeks at a time, And my younger brother, Chen Ming, is forced to drop out of medical school when we can no longer afford his tuition. His dreams of becoming a surgeon sacrificed on the altar of my poor judgment and misplaced trust in people who saw my family as nothing more than a resource to be exploited and discarded. I take 3 jobs to try to support what's left of our family, working at a restaurant during the day and cleaning offices at night and tutoring spoiled rich children on weekends. My hands raw and my back aching as I scrub floors in the same buildings where I used to attend charity galas as an honored guest. My former friends from high society crossing the street to avoid acknowledging me when our paths accidentally cross. The final blow comes 6 months later when I swallow my pride and approach Marcus at his office building, desperate enough to beg for help with my father's medical bills after his second heart attack. The one that leaves him barely clinging to life in an overcrowded public hospital because we can no longer afford the private care that was once taken for granted. I wait in the marble lobby of Zhao Corporation for 3 hours before Marcus finally agrees to see me. And when I enter his office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, I barely recognize the man I once thought I loved. His face cold and distant, as he looks at me like I'm a stranger who has wandered in from the street. "Elena," he says, not bothering to stand up or offer me a seat, his voice devoid of any warmth or recognition of our shared history. "I heard about your father. I'm sorry for your troubles." The word troubles makes it sound like our family's destruction is just an unfortunate coincidence, rather than the direct result of his betrayal. And I realize that he has already rewritten our entire relationship in his mind to absolve himself of any responsibility for what happened to us. "Marcus, please," I begin, hating the desperation in my own voice, but unable to stop myself from begging because my father's life depends on getting the money for his surgery. "I know what happened between us was painful, but my family supported yours when you needed help. Surely you can find it in your heart to help us now when we're the ones in crisis." Before he can answer, the office door opens and Lily walks in, her pregnancy now obvious beneath her designer maternity dress, her face glowing with the kind of happiness and security that I once thought would be mine, and she looks at me with a mixture of pity and disgust that makes my skin crawl. "Marcus, darling," she says, completely ignoring me as she moves to his side. "Security called and said there was someone here bothering you. Should I have them escort her out?" The casual cruelty of her words, the way she refers to me as someone, rather than using my name, makes it clear that I am less than nothing to both of them, a problem to be removed rather than a person deserving of basic human dignity. "That won't be necessary," Marcus says, but his tone makes it clear that my time is up, that he has no intention of helping me or my family despite everything we did for his. And I watch as he puts his arm around Lily's waist in a gesture of protection and ownership that he never showed me even during our most intimate moments. "Please," I whisper one last time, my voice breaking as I realize that this is my final chance to save my father's life. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for justice, for recognition of what my family sacrificed for yours. Lily laughs, a sound like breaking glass that echoes through the office, and she looks at me with the kind of contempt that wealthy people reserve for those they consider beneath their notice, her perfectly manicured hand resting on her pregnant belly like a trophy she's won by destroying my life. "Justice?" she repeats, her voice dripping with amusement and disdain. "Elena, dear, Marcus never loved you. Everyone knew that except you. You were just a convenient arrangement until I was ready to come home and claim what was always mine." She moves closer to me, her voice dropping to a whisper that only I can hear. "Did you really think someone like him could love someone like you? You were nothing more than a bank account with legs, useful until we didn't need your money anymore." The security guards arrive before I can respond, 2 large men in expensive suits who take my arms with professional efficiency and escort me toward the door while Marcus watches with complete indifference, not even bothering to pretend that this treatment bothers him or conflicts with any lingering affection he might have for the woman who once shared his bed and his promises of forever. "Don't ever come back here," Lily calls after me as the elevator doors close, her voice filled with the kind of triumph that comes from completely destroying an enemy. And I realize that this was always the plan, that every moment of kindness and affection Marcus showed me was calculated to keep me compliant until they no longer needed my family's resources. I arrive at the hospital 20 minutes too late, my father's body already growing cold in the hallway where he died alone because the surgery he needed was postponed again and again, while I desperately tried to raise money that would never come, and I collapsed beside his bed with the crushing realization that my naivety and poor judgment have cost me the most important person in my world. The funeral is a small, pathetic affair attended by only a handful of people who remember what the Chen family used to represent before I destroyed everything through my blind trust and foolish love. And I stand beside my father's grave, knowing that I have failed everyone who ever depended on me, that my weakness and stupidity have reduced a once proud family to nothing more than a cautionary tale about the dangers of trusting the wrong people. My mother dies 3 months later, her heart simply giving up under the weight of grief and financial stress. And I watch my brother Ming's eyes grow cold and distant as he blames me for everything we've lost, for the future that was stolen from him because his sister was too stupid to recognize that she was being used by people who never saw her as anything more than a means to an end. I spend the next 2 years working myself to death trying to pay off the debts that accumulated during my father's illness, living in a tiny studio apartment and eating one meal a day while my health deteriorates from stress and malnutrition and the crushing weight of guilt that follows me everywhere I go. A constant reminder of how thoroughly I destroyed everything that mattered to me. The end comes on a rainy Tuesday evening as I'm walking home from my shift at the restaurant, my body finally giving up after months of pushing beyond its limits. And I collapse on the sidewalk just 3 blocks from the apartment building where I've been hiding from the world since my family's destruction. The cold pavement against my cheek somehow comforting as everything finally goes dark. My last coherent thought before the darkness takes me is a bitter realization that I was never an option worth choosing, that Marcus and his family saw me as nothing more than a temporary convenience to be discarded when something better came along, that I wasted the most precious thing I had, my family's trust and love, on people who were never capable of valuing what they received. Then I opened my eyes and realized I had been reborn. The familiar weight of silk sheets against my skin, and the soft morning light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows that I recognize as belonging to my childhood bedroom in the Chen family mansion immediately tell me that something impossible has happened, that I am somehow back in my parents' house, 3 years before everything went wrong. Back in the bed where I used to dream about my future with Marcus Zhao before I learned that love and loyalty were just words people used to manipulate those foolish enough to believe in them. I sit up slowly, my heart pounding, as I take in every detail of the room that was sold along with everything else during our family's financial collapse. The antique vanity where my grandmother used to brush my hair and tell me stories about true love and happy endings. The bookshelf filled with romance novels that taught me to believe in fairy tales that don't exist in the real world. The photographs of family vacations and birthday parties and graduation ceremonies that documented a life of privilege and security that I took for granted until it was ripped away from me. The calendar on my nightstand shows a date that makes my blood run cold, because I know with perfect clarity what this day represents in the timeline of my destruction. This is exactly 24 hours before the engagement party where Marcus and I were supposed to announce our upcoming marriage to both families and all of our friends. The party that I spent weeks planning down to every last detail because I thought it was going to be the beginning of my happily ever after. But now I know better. Now I understand that the engagement party was never about celebrating our love, it was about finalizing the arrangement that would give the Zhao family access to my inheritance and my family's business connections, while keeping me bound to Marcus until Lily was ready to return from her convenient studies abroad and claim her place as his true love and the mother of his children. I remember everything with crystal clarity, every betrayal and humiliation and devastating loss that followed that night. Every moment of pain and desperation and crushing realization that I had been nothing more than a useful fool in someone else's love story, and I feel a cold fury building in my chest that is unlike anything I experienced in my previous life, a strategic rage that burns like ice rather than fire. The naive Elena Chen, who believed in love and loyalty and the basic goodness of the people closest to her, died in that hospital hallway beside her father's bed. And the woman who has been reborn in her place is someone entirely different. Someone who understands that sentiment is a luxury that destroys the people who indulge in it, while the ruthless and calculating inherit the earth. I will never be anyone's second choice again. Never allow myself to be used as a convenient placeholder while someone else claims the love and respect and devotion that should have been mine. And most importantly, I will never again confuse manipulation with affection or mistake strategic kindness for genuine caring. The phone on my nightstand rings, and I know without looking that it's Marcus calling to confirm the final details for tomorrow night's party, probably wondering if I've ordered enough champagne and hired sufficient staff to properly celebrate what he thinks will be the successful completion of his family's long-term plan to acquire my resources while maintaining his relationship with his true love. I answer on the fourth ring, keeping my voice carefully neutral as I listen to his familiar greeting, the same warm tone that used to make my heart race with happiness, but now sounds like fingernails on a chalkboard because I know how false it is, how every word is calculated to maintain my compliance until he no longer needs my cooperation. "Elena, darling," he says, and I have to grip the phone tighter to keep from hanging up immediately at his use of that endearment that I now know was never sincere. "I hope you're getting enough rest before tomorrow night. Mother is so excited about the party, and she's been telling everyone how perfect everything is going to be." Perfect for them, I think bitterly. Perfect for their plan to publicly cement our engagement while Lily remains safely hidden away until the moment is right for her triumphant return. But I keep my voice steady as I respond with the kind of enthusiasm that the old Elena would have shown. "Actually, Marcus," I say, surprised by how calm I sound despite the fury burning in my chest. "I've been doing some thinking about our relationship and our future together, and I've decided that I need to see you today to discuss something important." There's a pause on the other end of the line, and I can practically hear him trying to figure out what could be so urgent that it couldn't wait until after the party, probably assuming that I want to discuss some minor detail about the seating arrangements or the menu selection, never imagining that his carefully laid plans are about to be completely destroyed by the one person he thought he could count on to remain naive and compliant until the end. "Of course, darling," he says finally, his voice carrying just a hint of concern that makes me want to laugh at how little he actually knows about what I'm capable of when I'm no longer blinded by love and trust. "Would you like me to come to your house, or shall we meet somewhere?" "Come here," I tell him, already planning exactly what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it to cause maximum damage to his sense of security and control. I think this conversation requires privacy. After I hang up the phone, I take a long shower and dress carefully in a simple but elegant outfit that projects confidence and authority rather than the eager-to-please femininity that characterized my wardrobe during our relationship, choosing colors and styles that make me look like someone who has important business to conduct rather than a woman whose entire identity revolves around making her fiancé happy. I call my father's office and ask him to cancel his afternoon meetings because I need to discuss something urgent about our family's business dealings with the Zhao Corporation, and I hear the concern in his voice as he agrees to come home immediately, probably assuming that I've discovered some problem with the contracts that need to be resolved before tomorrow night's announcement. When Marcus arrives an hour later, I'm waiting for him in the formal living room that my mother uses for important guests, sitting in the chair that gives me the psychological advantage of height and authority while he's forced to look up at me from the lower sofa. A small detail that would have seemed insignificant in my previous life, but now feels like a crucial element in establishing the new dynamic between us. He looks exactly the same as I remember from 3 years in the future, handsome and confident, with the kind of casual arrogance that comes from never having to worry about money or status or the consequences of his actions. But now I can see through his charm to the calculating coldness underneath, the entitlement that makes him believe he deserves to have everything he wants without considering the cost to other people. "Elena," he says, moving to kiss me in greeting, but I turn my head at the last moment so his lips brush my cheek instead of my mouth. A subtle rejection that I can see surprises him because the old Elena would have melted into his arms and forgotten whatever concern had prompted this meeting. "Sit down, Marcus," I tell him, my voice carrying an authority that I never used with him before, and I watch his eyebrows rise slightly as he processes this change in my behavior, probably attributing it to pre-party nerves rather than a fundamental shift in the balance of power between us. "I've been thinking about our relationship," I begin, choosing my words carefully to create maximum impact. "And I've come to the conclusion that we want different things from marriage and from life. Things that are fundamentally incompatible with building a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and shared values." He starts to interrupt with what I'm sure would be reassurances and protests of love, but I raise my hand to stop him, my gesture commanding enough that he actually falls silent and waits for me to continue, probably shocked by this display of backbone from someone he's become accustomed to treating as a subordinate rather than an equal. "I'm breaking our engagement," I announce, the words dropping into the room like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock and confusion that I can see spreading across his face as he struggles to process this completely unexpected development. "Elena, what are you talking about?" he asks, his voice rising with what sounds like genuine panic. And I realize that he's not just surprised by my decision, he's genuinely afraid of what this means for his family's financial stability and his own future security, probably calculating how much money they stand to lose if the Chen family withdraws their support. "I'm talking about the fact that I deserve to be someone's first choice, not their convenient option," I reply, standing up and moving to the window so I don't have to look at his face while I deliver the killing blow that will destroy his sense of control and security. I deserve to be with someone who chooses me because they can't imagine their life without me, not because I'm useful for achieving their family's business goals. The silence that follows my words is deafening, and when I turn back to face him, I can see that he's gone pale, with the realization that somehow, impossibly, I know about the true nature of our relationship and the role I was meant to play in his family's larger strategy. "Elena, please," he begins, and I can hear the desperation creeping into his voice as he realizes that his carefully constructed facade is crumbling. "Whatever you think you know about my feelings or my family's intentions, you're wrong. I love you, and I want to build a life with you." "No, Marcus," I say, walking back to stand directly in front of him so he can see the absolute certainty in my eyes. "You love the idea of my family's money and connections. You love the security that comes from having a fiancé who will support your dreams without asking for anything in return except the illusion of being cherished, but you don't love me." I reach into my purse and pull out the engagement ring that I've been carrying since I woke up this morning, the symbol of promises that were never meant to be kept, and a future that was never going to include my happiness, and I place it on the coffee table between us with a finality that makes him flinch, as if I've slapped him. "This conversation is over," I tell him, my voice steady and cold as I move toward the door. "I'll handle canceling the party and informing both families that the engagement is off. You don't need to do anything except accept that you no longer have access to my family's resources or my personal devotion." "Elena, wait!" he calls after me, his voice breaking with what might be genuine emotion, or might just be panic at the thought of explaining this disaster to his mother. But I don't turn around, don't give him the satisfaction of seeing any doubt or regret in my expression. "I won't explain my decision to you, Marcus," I say without looking back. "I don't owe you justification for choosing my own happiness over your convenience, just like you never owed me honesty about where your heart really belonged." I hear him stand up and start to follow me, probably planning to try physical proximity and familiar manipulation tactics to change my mind, but before he can reach me, my father walks through the front door with the kind of commanding presence that built an empire and can still intimidate men half his age when necessary. "Elena," my father says, his eyes immediately taking in the tension in the room and the engagement ring sitting abandoned on the coffee table. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine, Daddy," I tell him, moving to his side and feeling the comfort of having family support that I took for granted in my previous life. "Marcus was just leaving. We've decided to call off the engagement." I watch my father's expression carefully, knowing that in my original timeline, this decision would have devastated him because of the business implications. But now I can see something different in his eyes. A flash of relief that suggests he may have had his own doubts about this alliance that he never expressed because he thought it was what I wanted. "I see," he says simply, his voice neutral but his posture subtly protective as he positions himself between Marcus and me. "Well then, I suppose there's nothing more to discuss." Marcus looks between my father and me with the kind of desperation that comes from watching a carefully constructed plan fall apart without warning, and I can see him calculating whether there's any way to salvage this situation, or if he needs to retreat and regroup with his family to come up with an alternative strategy. "Sir," he begins, addressing my father with the kind of formal respect that he hopes will open the door to negotiation. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Elena and I just need some time to work through whatever concerns she has." "There's no misunderstanding," I interrupt before my father can respond. And there's nothing to work through. I've made my decision, and it's final. My father nods once, a gesture of support that means more to me than Marcus will ever understand, and I watch as the reality of his situation finally sinks in for my former fiancé. The understanding that he has no leverage left and no way to force me back into compliance with his family's plans. I think you should leave now, my father says, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that has closed billion-dollar deals and ended careers. And Marcus has no choice but to accept defeat and walk toward the door with whatever dignity he can salvage from this disaster. This isn't over, Elena, he says as he reaches the threshold, his voice carrying a hint of threat that makes my father tense beside me. My family won't accept this, and neither will I. Your family will accept it because they have no choice, I reply, my voice calm and steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. And you'll accept it because the alternative is having the entire city know exactly why I ended our engagement and what kind of man you really are. He stops dead in the doorway, his entire body going rigid as he realizes that somehow I know about Lily and their secret relationship and probably other details that could destroy his reputation and his family's social standing if they became public knowledge. You wouldn't, he whispers. But I can see in his eyes that he knows I absolutely would. That the woman standing in front of him is not the naive, trusting Elena he thought he could manipulate indefinitely. Try me, I say. And after a long moment where we stare at each other across the divide that now separates us permanently, he turns and walks away without another word, leaving me victorious in the first battle of a war that I intend to win completely. After he's gone, my father and I sit in the living room, and I explain as much as I can about why I made this decision without revealing the supernatural circumstances of my knowledge, focusing instead on my growing realization that Marcus and his family saw our relationship as a business transaction rather than a genuine partnership built on love and mutual respect. I'm proud of you, my father says when I finish talking, his words hitting me like a physical blow because I remember how disappointed he was in my previous life when everything fell apart. How he died believing that his daughter's poor judgment had destroyed everything he worked to build. I know this can't be easy, he continues, and I know you must have feelings for him that make this decision painful. But I'd rather see you alone and happy than married to someone who doesn't value what an extraordinary woman you are. I have to excuse myself to go cry in the bathroom, overwhelmed by the gift of having my father's support and approval instead of his disappointment and heartbreak. And I spend several minutes staring at my reflection in the mirror and marveling at how different I look when I'm not carrying the weight of guilt and self-loathing that defined my previous life. The next few hours are spent making phone calls to cancel tomorrow night's party, a task that would have been humiliating in my original timeline, but now feels empowering because I'm taking control of my own narrative instead of allowing other people to write my story for me. I call the caterers and the florists and the musicians, explaining that there's been a change of plans and offering to pay any cancellation fees without complaint because the cost is insignificant compared to the freedom I'm purchasing with these decisions. I call my mother and explain what happened, listening to her initial shock give way to understanding as I describe my doubts about Marcus's sincerity and my growing certainty that we weren't compatible for the long term. I always wondered if he truly appreciated you, she admits, her voice soft with the kind of maternal intuition that sees things other people miss. He was charming, certainly, but there was something about the way he looked at you that seemed calculating rather than loving. By evening, word has spread through our social circle that the Chen Zhao engagement is off, and my phone starts ringing with calls from friends and acquaintances who want to know what happened, their voices carrying varying degrees of genuine concern and transparent curiosity about this unexpected scandal. I keep my explanations brief and dignified, saying simply that Marcus and I realized we wanted different things from marriage and decided it was better to end things now rather than continue with an engagement that wouldn't lead to lasting happiness for either of us. Some of the callers seemed disappointed, probably because they were looking forward to the party or the social drama that would have inevitably followed our marriage. But others expressed relief and support that suggests I wasn't the only person who had doubts about Marcus's suitability as a husband. The call that matters most comes just before midnight from David Liu, my childhood friend who lives in the estate next to ours and who has been quietly supportive throughout my relationship with Marcus, despite never saying anything explicit about his reservations. Elena, he says, his voice warm with genuine concern. I heard about what happened today. Are you all right? David and I have known each other since we were children. Our families moving in the same social circles and our properties sharing a border that made it natural for us to become friends, despite the 3-year age difference that seemed significant when we were young but means nothing now that we're adults. He's everything that Marcus isn't, steady and reliable and genuinely kind. The sort of man who remembers your birthday and asks about your family and listens when you talk instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. But I was always too dazzled by Marcus's charismatic charm to appreciate David's quieter qualities. I'm fine, I tell him, surprised by how much lighter I feel just hearing his voice. Actually, I'm better than fine. I feel like I've finally woken up from a dream that was turning into a nightmare. Good, he says simply, and I can hear the smile in his voice. You deserve someone who sees how lucky they are to have you, not someone who treats you like an accessory to their life. We talk for another hour about everything and nothing, and I'm struck by how easy and comfortable this conversation feels compared to the constant tension and performance that characterize my interactions with Marcus, how David makes me feel like I can be myself instead of the version of myself that someone else needs me to be. When I finally hang up the phone and get ready for bed, I feel a sense of peace and possibility that I haven't experienced since before my family's destruction in my previous life. A cautious optimism that maybe this time things can be different, if I'm smart enough and strong enough to make better choices. But I know that this is just the beginning, that Marcus and his family won't accept this setback quietly, and that I need to be prepared for whatever retaliation they might attempt once they realize that their carefully laid plans have been completely destroyed by the woman they thought they could control. The next morning brings the first sign of the storm to come, when Lady Zhao calls my mother with what she describes as concerns about my mental state and suggestions that perhaps I'm going through some kind of breakdown that requires professional intervention, clearly hoping to paint my decision as the product of temporary instability rather than permanent awakening to the truth about her son's character. My mother handles the call with the kind of polite but steely resolve that comes from generations of dealing with social climbers and manipulators, making it clear that our family stands behind my decision and considers the matter closed, but I can see the worry in her eyes as she tells me about the conversation. She seemed genuinely shocked, my mother says, almost panicked, like this wasn't just about Marcus's hurt feelings, but about something much more significant. I nod knowingly, understanding that Lady Zhao's panic comes from the realization that her family's financial stability was more dependent on their alliance with us than she let Marcus know, and that my defection represents a genuine threat to their business empire that goes far beyond hurt pride or damaged social standing. The second sign comes when my father returns from his office that afternoon with news that several business associates have mentioned receiving calls from Zhao Corporation representatives asking questions about our family's financial situation and international partnerships, clearly fishing for information that could be used to undermine our stability or identify vulnerabilities they could exploit. They're trying to figure out how to hurt us, I tell my father, sharing as much as I can about the Zhao family's true financial situation and their dependence on our support without revealing how I came by this knowledge. They can't afford to let us walk away without consequences because it sets a precedent that they're not as powerful as they pretend to be. My father listens carefully as I outline what I know about their business model and their various partnerships, his expression growing more serious as he realizes the extent to which the Zhao family has been using our resources and connections to maintain their position in the market. If what you're telling me is accurate, he says finally, then they're much more vulnerable than anyone realizes, and they have every reason to be desperate about maintaining our alliance. Which is exactly why we need to move first, I tell him, feeling the strategic part of my mind that was forged in the crucible of my previous life's destruction. We need to protect our assets and our partnerships before they can find ways to sabotage them. We spend the rest of the afternoon in my father's study, going through contracts and agreements and partnership deals, identifying every area where the Zhao family has access to our business operations and systematically closing those vulnerabilities before they can be exploited. It's exhausting work that requires careful attention to legal details and financial implications. but it's also empowering in a way that I never experienced in my previous life. The satisfaction of taking proactive steps to protect my family instead of waiting helplessly for disaster to strike. By the time we finish, we've created a comprehensive plan to disentangle our business interests from the Zhao Corporation over the next 6 months, using a combination of contract renegotiations and strategic partnership shifts that will leave us stronger and more independent while severely undermining their financial stability. You have excellent instincts for this, my father tells me, as we review the final details of our strategy. I never realized how much you understood about the business side of our operations. The truth is that I learned everything I know about corporate warfare from watching my family's empire get dismantled piece by piece in my previous life, but I can't tell him that, so I simply smile and say that recent events have motivated me to pay more attention to the details that really matter. The third sign of the approaching storm comes a week later when rumors start circulating through our social circle that I'm mentally unstable and possibly addicted to drugs or alcohol. Stories that are clearly being spread by people loyal to the Zhao family in an attempt to discredit my decision and make me look like an unreliable partner for any future business or personal relationships. The rumors are subtle at first, just concerned whispers about my recent behavior and questions about whether my family is getting me the help I obviously need. But I can see the pattern forming, and I know that it will escalate quickly if I don't take steps to counter it. I decide to fight fire with fire, using my own connections and my family's reputation for integrity to spread a different narrative, one that focuses on my growing maturity and business acumen rather than supposed mental health problems. And I start attending more social events and business functions, making sure to appear confident and articulate, and completely in control of my faculties, while subtly letting slip information about some of the questionable business practices I observed during my relationship with Marcus. I don't make direct accusations or provide specific details that could be traced back to me, but I plant seeds of doubt about the Zhao family's ethics and financial stability, letting other people draw their own conclusions about why someone might want to distance themselves from such an alliance. The strategy works better than I expected, partly because several other families have had their own doubts about the Zhao Corporation's business practices, but were hesitant to voice them openly, and my subtle revelations give them permission to share their own concerns and experiences. Within a month, the narrative has shifted completely, from questions about my mental state to questions about what I might have discovered about Marcus and his family that prompted such a dramatic change in my behavior, and I watch with satisfaction as the Zhao family finds themselves on the defensive instead of the offensive. The final phase of my revenge begins 3 months after I broke the engagement, when my strategic withdrawal of support and spread of damaging information finally starts to have visible effects on the Zhao Corporation's bottom line and market position. Their stock price begins to decline as investors lose confidence in their leadership and their ability to maintain the partnerships that were crucial to their international expansion. And I hear through my father's business network that they're having difficulty securing financing for several major projects that were supposed to define their growth strategy for the next decade. Marcus attempts to contact me several times during this period, leaving voicemails that start as attempts at reconciliation and gradually become more desperate pleas for information about what I'm telling people and whether there's any way to repair the damage that my defection has caused to his family's reputation. I don't return his calls or respond to his messages, maintaining the kind of dignified silence that forces him to wonder what I'm planning next while denying him any opportunity to manipulate or negotiate with me. And the real satisfaction comes when I learn that Lily Wong has returned from her studies abroad earlier than planned, probably summoned by Lady Zhao to help salvage the situation by providing Marcus with the emotional support and romantic legitimacy that he lost when I ended our engagement. But instead of fixing their problems, Lily's return seems to create new ones. As society notices the speed with which Marcus rebounds from our broken engagement into what appears to be a serious relationship with his childhood friend, leading to speculation about whether their connection predates our breakup by more than anyone previously realized. I attend the charity gala where they make their first public appearance as a couple, wearing a stunning silver gown that makes me look like royalty, and arriving on David Liu's arm in a clear signal that I've moved on to someone who actually deserves my attention and affection. The contrast between the two couples is impossible to ignore. David and I radiating the kind of easy confidence and genuine happiness that comes from being with someone who truly appreciates you, while Marcus and Lily seem tense and defensive, constantly scanning the room to gauge people's reactions to their relationship. When I'm asked about seeing my former fiance with his new girlfriend, I smile graciously and say that I'm happy Marcus has found someone who shares his values and priorities. A diplomatic response that manages to sound supportive while subtly implying that his values and priorities were the problem with our relationship. The evening reaches its perfect climax when Lady Zhao approaches me during the cocktail hour, her face a mask of polite social convention that can't quite hide the desperation underneath, clearly hoping to find some way to repair the damage that our broken engagement has caused to her family's position in society. Elena, dear, she says, her voice carrying the same false sweetness that I remember from my previous life. You look absolutely radiant tonight. I do hope you're feeling better about everything that happened between you and Marcus. Actually, Lady Zhao, I reply, my voice warm and confident, in a way that makes it clear I'm not the easily manipulated girl she used to know. I've never felt better. Ending the engagement was the best decision I've ever made. I watch her face carefully as I deliver this response, seeing the way her smile tightens at the corners and her eyes harden, with the realization that I'm not going to provide her with the opening she needs to begin rebuilding bridges between our families. I'm so glad to hear that, she says, but her tone suggests anything but gladness. And I see you've found new companionship. David Liu is quite a catch. He is, I agree easily, glancing across the room to where David is engaged in conversation with several prominent business leaders who clearly respect his intelligence and integrity. It's wonderful to be with someone who values partnership over domination. The barb hits its target, and I see Lady Zhao's composure slip just slightly as she realizes that I'm not just referring to David's character, but drawing an implicit comparison to her son's approach to relationships, and that my words will be overheard and remembered by the other guests within earshot. Well, she says, her voice strained with the effort of maintaining social pleasantries, while everything inside her wants to lash out at me for destroying her carefully laid plans. I suppose everything works out for the best in the end. It certainly does, I reply, raising my champagne glass in a mock toast, to getting exactly what we deserve. The conversation ends there, but I can see that my message has been received loud and clear, and I watch as Lady Zhao retreats to Marcus and Lily's side with the kind of urgency that suggests she's realized that her family's position is even more precarious than she previously understood. 6 months later, the transformation is complete. The Zhao Corporation has been relegated from major player to minor footnote in the city's business landscape. Their contracts and partnerships systematically absorbed by competitors who were waiting for an opportunity to move into their territory, while Chen Industries has emerged stronger and more independent than ever before. My relationship with David has blossomed into something beautiful and genuine, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared values, rather than calculated advantage and hidden agendas. And I find myself falling in love with someone who sees me as an individual rather than an asset to be acquired and exploited. We announce our engagement at the annual New Year's charity ball, the same event where Marcus and I were supposed to celebrate our upcoming wedding in my previous timeline. And the contrast between the two scenarios fills me with a satisfaction that goes beyond simple revenge. David proposes with his grandmother's ring, a stunning Art Deco diamond that represents family tradition and genuine love rather than the flashy contemporary setting that Marcus chose to impress other people rather than please me, and I accept with tears of joy that come from finally understanding what it feels like to be chosen rather than settled for. The wedding 6 months later is everything I dreamed of in my previous life but never experienced, a celebration of two families joining together in genuine happiness and mutual respect, with my father healthy and proud as he walks me down the aisle toward a man who promises to cherish and protect me for the rest of our lives. Marcus and Lily are not invited, though I hear through mutual acquaintances that their own relationship has struggled under the financial and social pressure caused by his family's fall from grace, and that they've been fighting constantly about money and status, and whose fault it is that their perfect plan fell apart so spectacularly. My final act of revenge comes a year after my wedding, when I learn that Marcus has taken a middle management position at a company owned by one of my father's business partners, essentially working for the empire that his family tried to destroy. And I make sure that his supervisor knows about his history of disloyalty and opportunistic behavior. I don't try to get him fired or create additional problems for him, but I do ensure that he will never advance beyond his current position, that he will spend the rest of his career watching other people achieve the success and recognition that he thought would be his by right, a fitting punishment for someone who believed he could take everything I offered without giving anything real in return. But the real victory isn't Marcus's downfall. It's the life I've built in the aftermath of rejecting his manipulation. The marriage to David that grows stronger and more fulfilling every day, the business empire that my father and I have expanded together using the skills and insights I gained from surviving my previous life's destruction. When our first child is born, a beautiful daughter with David's gentle eyes and my stubborn chin, I hold her in my arms and promise that I will teach her to value herself too highly to ever accept being someone's second choice, that she will grow up knowing the difference between love and convenience, between partnership and exploitation. I name her Grace, for the grace that saved me from a life of being used and discarded by people who never deserved my loyalty. And as I watch David cradle our daughter with the kind of tenderness and wonder that Marcus never showed me even in our most intimate moments, I understand that sometimes the greatest revenge is simply refusing to settle for less than you deserve and building something beautiful with someone who actually values what you have to offer. Marcus Zhao chose his side in front of his family, choosing convenience and strategy over genuine love and partnership, but I chose to never be an option again, and in making that choice, I found everything that I thought I wanted from him with someone who was worthy of receiving it. The naive girl who believed in fairy tales and happy endings died the night she discovered that love without respect is just pretty packaging around exploitation. But the woman who rose from her ashes built an empire and a family and a love story that was real instead of calculated, proving that sometimes the best revenge is living so well that your enemy's betrayal becomes the catalyst for achieving everything they tried to prevent you from having. In the end, I got exactly what I deserved, and so did everyone else.